The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Merci, Madame Speaker, Madame la Présidente. Madame Speaker, I welcome the opportunity to participate in this emergency debate. The Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline represents a crucial test of this country's ability to get infrastructures built that are in Canada's national interest. Watching the Prime Minister's leadership on this file over the past number of months has no doubt reassured Canadians from coast to coast to coast that their country is in good hands. The Prime Minister has said repeatedly, with quiet but firm determination, that the TMX pipeline will be built, and it will. Why? Because our government has appropriately determined that this $7.4 billion project is in Canada's national interest. Madame la Présidente, I'll be splitting time with my friend and colleague, the member for Surrey Newton, this evening. That it will create thousands of construction jobs and countless more spin-off jobs in every part of the country. That it will ensure Canadian access to global oil markets and world prices. That it will open new economic opportunities for the 43 Indigenous communities that have signed more than $300 million in benefit agreements along the pipeline's route. That it will generate as much as $3.3 billion in new government revenues over 20 years of operation, new tax dollars to help pay for our hospitals and schools, to build new roads and safer bridges, and to help fund Canada's transition to a low-carbon economy. And those are just some of the reasons why the Prime Minister has promised that this pipeline is going to be built in a responsible way. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, excuse me, interprovincial pipelines are the responsibility of the federal government. And when making decisions on interprovincial pipeline projects, it is the Government of Canada's duty to act in the national interest. That's exactly what happened with the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline. Now, Madam Speaker, as a member from the province of Ontario, tonight's debate is not some esoteric discussion that I'm involved with or I wanted to discuss. It's something very near and dear to me. Madam Speaker, I grew up in the riding of Skeena-Bulkley Valley in Prince Rupert, British Columbia, a riding that we know is situated on the northwest coast underneath the Alaska Panhandle, a riding that's beautiful, mountains, scenery, which sometimes I miss. I'm very proud that our government has put in place a $1.5 billion Oceans Protections Plan. So up and down the BC West Coast, whether it's the Sunshine Coast or just in the Lower Mainland or up in Prince Rupert, that our oceans will be protected. Madam Speaker, my parents and my family have resettled in the riding in North Burnaby, where, yes, the current TMX pipeline runs, where, yes, the Chevron refinery sits approximately 2 kilometers away from where my parents enjoy their retirement just down from Burnaby Mountain. It's something that's very important to me, very important that we get this right, and we are getting this right. Madam Speaker, Madam President, the President, I sat on Scotia's bond desk for 10 years and I covered the oil and gas sector, the midstream sector. For 10 years I saw this large differential in prices for our Canadian product, our Alberta oil, at a much larger discount than what you could get for what was called WTI or Brent. And this discount is costing our economy billions of dollars, schools that could be built, hospitals that could be funded. And Madam Speaker, Madam la Présidente, we are working to close this gap, and one way we're doing it is to build a pipeline to Tidewater to diversify our markets and also, yes, to close that differential, because we need to. That is the right thing to do for our economy. That is the right thing to do for those literally hundreds of thousands of middle-class families, middle-class workers that will benefit from this project. During the Conservative time of government for 10 years, it's true, they did not build a pipeline to Tidewater. It's a fact. Sorry to have to tell them that, but it's the truth of their government. They failed. Let's put it straight. They failed. That differential has cost the economy billions and billions of dollars, whether it's provincial revenues, municipal revenues, or at the same time, federal revenues. I was proud of the Prime Minister on April 15th when he commented about why is this pipeline in our national interest. And he mentioned the aluminum workers in Alma, Quebec. And he mentioned the aerospace workers in Montreal. And he mentioned the auto factory workers down in Windsor. And he mentioned the forestry workers up in my old hometown of Prince Rupert, British Columbia. We will stand by as a government today and tomorrow and for years to come for middle-class Canadians who want to work hard, want to save and want to build a better future for their families. That is what this debate is about this evening. And we stand and we will say we will build this pipeline and we will get it done, Madame la Présidente. And let's not forget the people that will actually be building the pipe fitter, the tinsmith, the millwright. Those are the folks that we work hard here every day, day in and day out. Those are the folks that we have come to Ottawa to represent. Madame la Présidente, I worked on Bay Street and Wall Street, but my roots are on Main Street. And they were on those streets in Prince Rupert, British Columbia, where half the population there was Indigenous and the rest of us were new Canadians. Whether we were born or not, we all came from somewhere except for our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And Madame la Présidente, we have many Indigenous groups that have come together that are joining us to build this pipeline, and we'll work with them and we'll continue to consult, unlike the other side, who failed to consult, as proven in the courts, and they failed to consult. So going back to my prepared remarks, I think it's worth reviewing that process in order to remind Canadians that the decision to approve the project was taken very seriously. That it was only green-lighted after careful review, extensive consultations, and thoughtful deliberation based on sound science and Canada's best interests. I'd like to highlight some of that today, or this evening. First, Canadians know that our government was developing a permanent fix to the way major resource projects are reviewed. We implemented an interim approach to address projects that were then in the queue, which is fair, such as TMX. That interim approach was based on 5 guiding principles such as expanding public consultations, enhancing Indigenous engagement, and assessing upstream greenhouse gas emissions associated with the projects. As part of this, our government appointed a special ministerial panel of distinguished Canadians who traveled the length of the proposed pipeline route, ensuring Indigenous peoples and local communities were thoroughly canvassed and heard. And our government made those discussions public on the internet for all Canadians to see. In the end, we accepted the National Energy Board's recommendations, including 157 conditions as part of a wider approval of the project and our larger plan for clean growth. For example, we are also investing approximately $65 million over 5 years to co-develop an Indigenous Advisory and Environmental Monitoring Committee for the life cycle of this pipeline, as well as the Line 3 pipeline. This is a Canadian first for an energy infrastructure project in our country. We are doing it right, and we are going to get it right. We have also developed a targeted action plan to promote recovery of the southern resident killer whale population. These are the kind of specific measures we should expect for a project of this magnitude. But we shouldn't look at TMX in isolation. We also need to consider how the pipeline fits within our government's overall vision for Canada in this clean growth century. For example, we've signed the Paris Accord on climate change. We've worked with the provinces and territories and consulted with Indigenous peoples to develop the Pan-Canadian framework on clean growth and climate change, a plan that lays out Canada's clear path to a clean, low-carbon economy. At the same time, our government is putting a price on carbon. Yes, a price on carbon. Accelerating the phase-out of coal, which will benefit our environment, lower asthma incidents, and save lives. Promoting energy efficiency, regulating methane emissions, and so it goes. Creating a low-carbon fuel standard, and making generational investments, including in the recent budget 2018, in clean technology, renewable energy, and green infrastructure. The TMX pipeline fits within all of this and will support our government's efforts to make Canada a leader in the transition to a low-carbon economy. For example, the TMX pipeline is consistent with Canada's climate plan to 2030. Its GHG emissions are well within Alberta's 100 megaton cap on the oil sands. And it is complemented by the most ambitious, as I referred to earlier this evening, Oceans Protection Plan in our country's history. A $1.5 billion investment to protect our waters, our coastline, and marine life for literally generations and generations to come. The Ocean Protection Plan builds on and maximizes every possible safeguard against an oil spill happening in the first place, measures that include air, surveillance, double-hull tankers, and double pilotage. Transport Canada has been leading the way on this with its creation of an expert panel a few years ago to guide government actions on spill responses. The new Oceans Protection Plan reflects this and includes the largest investment in the Canadian Coast Guard in years, strengthening its eyes and ears to ensure better communications with vessels and make navigation safer by putting more enforcement officers on the coast and adding new radar sites in strategic locations. Should something happen, there will be more primary environmental response teams to bolster the Coast Guard's capacity, including several Coast Guard vessels equipped with specialized tow kits that will improve its ability to respond quickly. And amid all of this, Madam Speaker, we are enforcing the polluter pays principle. This is a world-class, one more time. This is a world-class approach that meets or exceeds the gold standards and set by places such as Alaska and Norway. Thank you, Madam President.
I'm sure that the member will have a chance to finish up anything that he wanted to add during questions and comments. The honourable member for Edmonton-Wetaskiwin.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I listened with interest to my honourable colleague's speech there. As with almost all of the Liberal speakers today, they seem to mix up consultation for action. You know, they seem to use those phrases interchangeably. The reality is that there is no action whatsoever. You know, he said, and I maybe he misspoke, but based on the government's record, I don't think so. He said, quote, "We will stand by as a government." That's exactly what they're doing. They're standing by as a government. You know, they inherited a situation where Northern Gateway had been approved before they came to power, where Energy East was well on its way. What did they do? They canceled Northern Gateway. They changed the rules to make it impossible for Energy East to move forward. My question for the honourable member is, why should anyone believe that they will actually take action this time?
The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
I thank my honourable colleague from Alberta. I know he and I have worked considerably on the cause of autism and raising awareness with that within my riding. To directly answer his comments, you know, the first thing we had to do was rebuild confidence in the institutions, something that the Conservatives under 10 years of their rule eroded. They eroded the confidence in approvals of getting pipelines done. So we had the balance of the economy and the environment working hand in hand, and that's one of the first things we did. We put in an interim set of guided principles, and yes, we approved TMX, and yes, it will be built, and yes, we will bring oil, bitumen to Tidewater. We will export it. We will reduce that differential, and we'll ensure that we get the world price, not the discount, which is costing us literally $1 billion or $1.5 billion, depending on who you look at in terms of research, a month in lost foregone revenues and taxes. We will get that done as a government because we have listened, we have consulted, and we have put in place a set of measures that brings confidence to the process, something the other side failed to do in 10 years. Thank you, Madam President.
Good job.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat Langford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I appreciate the Orwellian logic from the Liberals where they're saying that we have to fight climate change by building pipelines and expanding the oil production. But I want to drill down on the economics because that's what the member was really talking about. Now, last month it was reported in the National Observer that the Louisiana offshore oil port was completed and the very first very large crude carrier carrying 2 million tons of crude oil was bound to China. The only vessel that can make it into Vancouver Harbour is an Aframax, which can only carry a maximum of 550,000 barrels of oil. So given the new dynamics that are happening and the fact that Kinder Morgan's crude exports, 99% of them all go to the United States, I was wondering if the member can comment, where are these markets in Asia if the Americans have already beat us to it? And furthermore, why are we investing money in a diluted bitumen exporting pipeline when all of the economics makes sense for us to be investing in value added? We are shipping jobs. We see it in British Columbia with the export of raw logs. Where we export the raw product, we inherit all of the finished goods. The same is happening with the same kind of mentality, and shame on the Liberals for following the same disastrous economic course. I'd like to hear the members' comments on that.
The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
I thank my colleague from British Columbia for those comments. The first thing I would say, what we need to do is we need to remove the bottlenecks in the system, which is impacting the price, and that's causing the discount. And second of all, any concerned person for the environment would know we want to take oil that's being put on rail, we want to put it in pipe, because pipe is safer than rail, for the environment, for everything. It's a proven fact. And the NDP should be supporting that. And they should be supporting the thousands, literally tens of hundreds of thousands of workers that will be building this and be saving this. Now, with regards to prices for products, when you remove the bottleneck, you will see the price being up. And that's what we are doing in terms of who's using that oil thing. There are 4 sectors in North America called PAD 1, 2, 3, and 4. We need to displace foreign imports of oil into Canada with our own refined product, and we're on the way of doing that as well. In Alberta, there is this thing called the Northwest Sturgeon Refinery, which was invested by the Alberta government along with private partnerships. I was there in January at the Alberta Heartland Industrial Conference. It's an amazing thing to do, amazing thing to see, it's an amazing thing to tour, and you should also go see it because that value added is actually happening. But along with that, the capacity to do that is constrained. It takes many years to bring on a refinery. Many, many, many years, a very long time, not just a couple, a long time. So in the interim, you must develop the resources that you are blessed with, whether it's forestry jobs, and I don't see anybody against forestry.
Unfortunately, the time is up, and I need to go to another